المصرية والسودانية في ظل الأزمات التي
In light of the developments in Sudan that is impacting also neighboring countries, the Sudanese-Egyptian coordination is based on relations deeply rooted between both countries. Now, the flight of Abdel Burhan, the head of the Transitional Council in Sudan, arrived at Cairo airport, and Cairo would witness an important session of talks and the discussion of a number of issues, be it the Sudanese crisis and coming up with real solutions to end the crisis and the conflict in Sudan, as well as an attempt to put an end to this conflict and reaching an agreement between different parties, because by the end of the day it's Sudan and the Sudanese who are negatively impacted, and the Egyptian political leadership is keen on supporting Sudan to reach peace and stability, to protect the lives of the Sudanese, as well as protect and preserve the wealth of Sudan. It is no secret that the historical relations between Egypt and Sudan have always been great. I'm talking about historical relations, geographical relations, and also popular relations between both countries. Egypt had received a lot of Sudanese guests recently and over the previous years, and this reflects the strong relations between both countries. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is heading now to the Sudanese plain to receive Burhan, the head of the Transition Council in Sudan, at the beginning of this important visit to Cairo. A number of important topics are going to be discussed during these talks.
خاصة المستوى الاقتصادي، لكن لا يغيب
We can see that there is strong economic relations as well and economic cooperation between both countries, Egypt and Sudan, and there are also joint ventures and joint investments. There are Egyptian investments in Sudan, and Egyptian businessmen work in different economic sectors in Sudan, and there is also joint agriculture as well as joint manufacturing between Egypt and Sudan, as well as exporting food products. The different sectors were negatively impacted recently because of the developments in Sudan, and during these talks we expected that the two leaders are going to discuss different issues and topics to reach rapprochement between both countries regarding a number of regional files, be it the developments in Palestine as well as water security and the water issue, especially the stance regarding the Ethiopian position and the Renaissance Dam. There has always been high-level coordination between both countries, and this reflects the deep Sudanese-Egyptian relations. So these relations are an extension of Egypt and Sudan, and the River Nile, as Egypt and Sudan are considered to be the downstream of the River Nile, and Sudan is an important strategic depth for Egypt, and Egypt also is the doorway to the African continent, and for Egypt, Sudan is considered to be a matter of national security. And the land between both countries has always been united in its geography, demography, and there has always been a large number of Sudanese who live here on the land of Egypt. They were talking about 4 million Sudanese who used to live in Egypt in the past, and in addition to them, Egypt has recently hosted a lot of Sudanese guests, and there are also a number of checkpoints and ports between Egypt and Sudan for trade exchange between both countries. Of course, things recently were affected by the difficult conditions in Sudan, yet we're always talking about the fact that Egypt is always supporting Sudan. Egypt has always supported the unity of Sudan and would never give up on this unity and these geographical and historical links. Egypt has always supported the brotherly Sudanese people, as there is no difference between them. And even there are strong relations between both countries at the level of peoples. A lot of Sudanese live here in Egypt as if they are in their homeland. And it is so important for Egypt to have Sudan united, and it is a matter of national security, be it for the Sudanese or for the Egyptians at all levels. This visit will cover political issues, economic topics, and there would be coordination for the future, as well as reaching an agreement between different parties in Sudan to put an end to the conflict there, because by the end it's the Sudanese people who are suffering from these tensions, and these tensions also affect the whole region. One of the important files in the African continent is the Sudanese development. So this conflict should come to an end in a way that is approved and accepted by all parties. I'm talking here about the different Sudanese parties, and I think that the Sudanese people prefer stability and peace. And the people are also looking for prosperity. Now President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the head of the Transitional Sovereignty Council in Sudan would head to Ittihadiyya Palace to start the bilateral talks. This delegate from Sudan is comprised of a number of Sudanese ministers and leaders to cover different topics and cooperation fields at the official levels and also at the level of the people. There is a lot to be discussed to coordinate stances, and this is one of the most important things that would be discussed during this visit. This visit is a recurrent visit, and there has always been meetings with the different Sudanese leaders, as the political leadership, of course, is the highest level of meetings at the level of countries and at the diplomatic levels and at the economic levels also. There are a lot of agreements also at different levels. The Egyptian-Sudanese relations developed recently over the previous years, especially after President Sisi assumed office and established important stable relations. And a lot of issues were developed in the relations between Egypt and Sudan. And these visits try to reach agreements, especially political agreements. And the Egyptian-Sudanese relations have never been affected by any changes that happened. And the analysts and specialists in different fields mention that the integration between Egypt and Sudan would be enough to support the economies of both countries, because Egypt has a lot of strengths that it can share with Sudan, and also Sudan with its natural resources and wealth can help. Sudan is an important country in Africa and in the Middle East region. Sudan is an Arab African country, exactly like Egypt, and there are a lot of trade agreements between both countries. And everyone, of course, is looking for a brighter future for both countries if they can establish more joint projects and work towards more integration at the economic level. But first, Sudan needs to be united. A lot of blood was shed over the previous years, although Sudan has a lot of wealth and a lot of resources from which it can benefit. But it needs just to achieve stability to be able to do it. And Egypt has always had a fixed stance towards Sudan, and Egypt has always been keen on not intervening in the internal affairs of countries. And Sudan is to the south of Egypt, so it's considered to be the strategic depth for Egypt in the African continent. Egypt has always had a fixed political position to support the unity of countries and to develop cooperation with all the neighboring countries without intervening in the internal affairs of countries. Egypt only tries to play a role as a mediator between conflicting parties to reach an agreement. And Egypt has always been keen on making this balance. And by the end of the day, all these relations are for the integrity of the Sudanese territories as well as the unity of the Sudanese, and we always wish the best for the Sudanese. Sudan, as I mentioned, is an important big country that has a lot of wealth and resources, and it is one of the Nile Basin countries, and it has fertile lands full of a lot of natural resources. And maybe over these years in Africa and the Middle East, there are a lot of tensions, and Egypt has always tried to play a role in easing these tensions at different levels. Egypt has tried to contribute to settling the dispute and reducing the tension in Gaza Strip. And we are following on a daily basis the developments in Gaza. And Egypt always supports the right of all nations and peoples to enjoy stability, security, and welfare. And this would be one of the files that would be discussed between President Sisi and the different leaders. And over the past months, Egypt has tried to cooperate with all countries to help Gaza. And the president had done a lot at the diplomatic level. And the Egyptian Foreign Ministry also is exerting efforts to ease the tension in Gaza Strip. All these efforts are exerted to settle tension in Sudan, in addition, of course, to the Libyan file that would be discussed also between the leaders of Egypt and Sudan, because Libya is a neighboring country to both Egypt and Sudan. Egypt is always trying to support stability and unity of these countries, and is trying to encourage them not to resort to military solutions or violence. Egypt always supports peace, the efforts of peace, and is capable of protecting peace on its lands and within its borders. Egypt has never been an aggressor, and here I quote President Sisi when he said that Egypt is a country that had always supported peace, and Egypt practices a noble policy. Talking about the Egyptian-Sudanese relations is about bilateral Sudanese-Egyptian African relation. Egypt presided over the African Union in 2019. And tried through this presidency to the African Union to help African countries, and tried to connect the African continent to different countries worldwide. There are business councils between Egypt and a lot of African countries that covers different sectors. And now President Sisi, accompanied by Colonel General Al-Burhan to Al-Ittihadiyya Palace to start this important visit. And now we'll move on to Ittihadiyya Palace.
أحييكم مشاهدينا الكرام من
Dear
مقر رئاسة
viewers,
الجمهورية
we
بمصر
are
اليومية
at the
حيث ننظر
Presidency
لحضراتكم
Palace
مراسم
in
استقبال
Heliopolis,
رئاسة الوزراء بضيفنا
where we are
الكريم
going
الطريق
to
والأول عبد
witness
الفتاح البرهان
the official
رئيس المجلس
reception
السيادتي
of the
للانتقالية السوداني
President of the
الذي يزور مصر
Sudanese
حاليا
Sovereignty
لإجراء
Council,
مباحثات رسمية
Al-Burhan,
مع
who is
السيد
here to
الرئيس عبد
have
الفتاح السيسي
official
رئيس
talks
الجمهورية
with
والذي
President
كان
Sisi, the
باستقباله منذ
President of
قليل
Republic,
بمطار
and
القاهرة
he
الدولي.
was received by the
مصر منذ
President
اندلاع الأزمة
a few minutes
تفتخر وحدة
ago in the airport. Egypt, since the conflict in Sudan, has always kept supporting the Sudanese people to stop the bloodshed and to protect the unity of Sudan and its stability. Egypt used all its institutions in this context for this purpose, to support Sudan, the brotherly country, according to the Egyptian external fixed positions based on protecting the unity of the countries as well as the stability of the Sudanese. And Egypt used all means that can protect the Sudanese and protect the integrity of its lands and its stability. Egypt, since the first moment, President Sisi held a number of contacts with all parties to the conflict and crisis in Sudan, and the President also had external contacts with other leaders worldwide and also leaders in Africa, in addition to Arab Islamic countries, to stop the bloodshed in Sudan and to protect the unity and stability of Sudan, as well as exerting all efforts to try to end this crisis in Sudan. In this context, it's worth noting that President Sisi held a number of visits to Sudan since the 30th of June 2013, and after this revolution and after President Sisi assumed presidency in June 2014, President Sisi held a number of visits to Sudan. And Sudan was the first external visit the President made. And also the President, after assuming office for the second time, he headed also to Sudan. These visits between Egypt and Sudan are multiple. And the President has visited Sudan 7 times over the past years, and this signifies the attention given by Egypt to Sudan as a brotherly country and as a strategic depth for Egypt in Africa. In addition to protecting the fraternal relations between both countries and both peoples, as Egypt and Sudan have strong historical relations. Egypt also does not save any efforts in working on the stability and the unity of Sudan in this context, not only through the mutual visits that reinforced these ties and relations, but also through the fact that Egypt played an influential role on the ground for protecting Sudan and also contacting all different entities and parties to settle this dispute and end this crisis, to preserve the Sudanese and Sudan, and protect also the elements in Sudan and prevent external intervention in the internal affairs of Sudan. Egypt has always called for internal solutions within Sudan, and in case the conflict widens between the brothers, Egypt and other countries saw that they need to intervene in order to contain this crisis.
إذا فلمصر دور جوهري
Egypt has
في
an
صون
essential
السلم
role
والأمن
in
على المستوى
preserving
الإقليمي وأيضا
security
في
and
القلب منه
peace
السودان.
at the regional
السودان هي
level and
دولة
at the
شقيقة
heart comes Sudan, as Sudan
وتحاول
is a
مصر
brotherly
بكافة
country,
الطرق
and
والسبل
Egypt is trying
ويحاول
by
الرئيس عبد
all
الفتاح
means,
السيسي من
and
خلال
President Sisi is
اتصالات
trying through his
والمؤسسات المعنية بهذا
contacts
الأمر في هذا الإطار أن تحافظ على وحدة
to
وسلامة
preserve
الشعب
the
السوداني
unity of
الشقيق وأيضا
Sudan
حقن
and
دمائه
to
وأيضا
prevent the
بالإضافة إلى
bloodshed
صون
of the Sudanese,
مقدرات
in
الشعب
addition
السوداني
to
والحفاظ على
supporting the
أرضه.
Sudanese
مشاهدينا
people.
الكرام الأزمة
Dear
الراهنة
viewers,
هي
this
تعد تحديا
crisis
بالغا
in
لاستقرار
Sudan
في
is
المنطقة
considered
بأسرها.
to
لكن
jeopardize
العلاقات المتجذرة
stability in the
الضاربة
whole
في عمق
region, but the
الدولتين تجعل
deeply
مصر
rooted
والسودان
relations between
يمتلكان
Egypt and
نفس
Sudan
المصير
make
الواحد.
them
مصر
enjoy the
بقيادة
same fate.
الرئيس عبد
Egypt,
الفتاح
under the
السيسي قدمت
leadership
كامل
of
الدعم
President
للشعب
Sisi,
السوداني
provided
الشقيق
full
في
support
تطلعاته
to
نحو
the
تحقيق الأمن
Sudanese and their
والاستقرار
aspirations
والسلام.
to achieve peace, stability and security.
تحدثنا عن الزيارات
We've talked
القياسية
about
المتتالية والتي
the
لم تحدث في
several
تاريخ
visits
البلدين
that were
حيث
held
قام
between
السيد
both
الرئيس
leaders.
بإجراء 7
President
زيارات
Sisi paid
والسياسة
7
الخارجية
visits to
المصرية كما
Sudan,
نعلم
and the
جميعا
Egyptian
تعمل على
Foreign
إقامة
Ministry is
علاقات
working
تتميز
on
بالخصوصية
developing
والتفاهم العميق مع
special
السودان الشقيق
relations with
وإحداث
Sudan,
نقلة
as
نوعية
well
في
as
مختلف
making
المجالات.
a change in
وتعد
different
زيارات
sectors and
الرئيس عبد
fields.
الفتاح
The
السيسي إلى
visits of
السودان
President
الشقيق هي
Sisi to
دليل على عمق العلاقات
Sudan
المصرية
symbolizes
السودانية
the
وحرص
deep
الرئيس
relations
السيسي
between
أن
both
تكون
countries and
أول
the
جولة
keenness
خارجية له
of
عقب
President
إعادة
to
انتخابه
have
للولايات
the
الثانية
first
للسودان
official visit he
الشقيق.
ever makes after
كما
assuming
كانت أيضا
presidency to Sudan.
ضمن جولته الأولى أيضا أو أول جولة
And
خارجية له في ولايته
the first
الأولى.
external visit to the president was to Sudan, and afterwards other visits were made to Khartoum, the last of which was March 2021. And here Egypt is going on developing its relations with Sudan as it realizes the importance of Sudan and the fact that it is an extension of Egypt in Africa, and it is connected also to Egyptian national security. So Egypt is connecting with all parties in Sudan to reach a permanent ceasefire to protect the lives of the Sudanese and to prevent the intervention of any external powers in a way that would ignite the internal tension. In this context comes the visit of the President of Sudanese Sovereignty Transitional Council, Colonel General Al-Burhan, to discuss the developments in Sudan, the developments in the whole region, and the bilateral relations between both countries. Egypt, with its fixed policy, supports Sudan at different levels. In addition to Egypt's role in preserving the stability and the unity of Sudan, especially through receiving a number of Sudanese guests and citizens in Egypt. And this is an extension of the Egyptian appreciative, active role in its regional surroundings. These are Egyptian intensified efforts to settle the dispute in Sudan. President Sisi has always emphasized that we need to abort this crisis through contacts with different Sudanese parties. The President, through his contacts with his counterparts in Africa and the leaders of the EU and the US, that we need to settle the dispute in Sudan and prevent it from going towards chaos. Egypt is continuing its relations with its brother Sudan. There are historical strong relations between Egypt and Sudan. Egypt and Sudan were one country at a certain time. And this has strengthened the relations between both countries that has reflected positively throughout history.
فمصر والسودان
Egypt and Sudan both have important elements to achieve integration between them from the economic perspective, as well as the Sudanese and the Egyptians are considered to be a great human capital that can provide a lot of goods and services and assimilate them also, and this can encourage trade exchange between both countries. Also, looking at the relations between Egypt and Sudan, the national anthem of Sudan.